Okay, 6th grade, in lesson 8.2, we're going to talk about two different kinds of graphs and how they're used. The first one we'll talk about is a histogram. Okay? A histogram looks like this. The bars are all connected. Alright? The reason that the bars are connected is that it shows kind of what's happening over time more easily. So histograms are used to show a trend oftentimes. The bars are smashed together, they're connected, so that you can see what the line, it kind of creates a line, and it's supposed to show what the trend is. The other thing that's unique about histograms is it often shows the frequency of something within an interval, within a range. For example, an age range. Let's say that we were going to graph the number of minutes spent reading by people of certain ages. Okay? The number of minutes spent reading. So from ages 0 to 9, people, the average is, let's say it's 28 minutes a day. Okay? 28 minutes a day. And then from 10 to 20, 31 minutes a day. And from 21 to 30, 39 minutes a day. And from 31 to 40, 55 minutes a day. And so you can see a trend in the number of minutes being read, and notice that it's not a certain one age that we're graphing, but we're graphing a range of ages of people. And that's what a histogram can do. So when you need to graph, let's say people in this range do this, then you can use a histogram to do that, to graph that information. Okay? Any questions about what a histogram looks like, or what it does, or what the ranges means? Do you know what all these ages, or what all these ranges mean then? Are you comfortable with this information? Any questions on histograms?
No, I think we understand.
Okay. Then let's talk about stem and leaf graphs. And we went through this example last class. But the stem and leaf graph is used to display numbers in order. And one of the nice things about a stem and leaf graph is just by looking at it, it creates kind of like a bar graph or a histogram. Because you can tell just by looking at the numbers which category or which stem has the most leaves. So when you're doing a stem and leaf graph, what's the first number? What are the stems? Where do they come from, Danny?
One.
Yep, they come from the place of the highest digits, or the highest place values that you want to use. So in this case, in this set of numbers, these are all in the teens. They're all 2-digit numbers. And so graphing them in order, this number, this 1, 0, represents the number 10. And there are 2 10s, and 1 15, and 1 18. So we put these in order, and then there's 21, 22, 25, 25, 25. Notice that we found there's 3 25s, so that is the mode. The one that occurs the most often. Right?
Yes.
And then because we're listing them in order, we know that there is 18 numbers. And so between between these two is the median. So we found the median by adding 25 plus 30, and then dividing it by 2, And we got the median of 27.5. That's another way that you can use a stem and leaf graph. Okay? Any questions about the stem and leaf graphs? We went through these the other day, but any questions about the stem and leaf graphs? Okay. Then, let's go to pictographs. One more definition that you got to write down today. Pictographs. And you've been using these probably since kindergarten or first grade, right? Because they're cool little pictures on them and everything. Pictographs are best to show a small number of items of a few different subjects. Pictographs use pictures to represent a multiple of numbers. So it might say every smiley face is worth 3 people. And then you can count the smileys. Okay? So, pictographs are best to show a small number of items of a few different subjects. Maybe it's favorite sport, or a survey about favorite season. Summer, fall, winter, or spring. Or something like that. Okay? So in our lesson for today, we're going to be choosing the best types of graph to use. Alright? Well, first we're going to identify which graph it is in lesson 3. And then in lesson 4, we're going to choose the right graph to use.
We're just checking what we got.
Okay. So, open your books to page 232. We've been through all the different types of graphs now. Bar graphs, line graphs, circle graphs, histograms, and pictographs, and all the advantages and disadvantages of each. So, let's look at this lesson, comparing the different types of graphs. Alright? Page 233, number 1. Ashley wants to visit Chicago during a month when the average temperature is above 60 degrees Fahrenheit and likely to increase. The line graph shows the average monthly temperature data, and the bar graph shows the number of cold, moderate, and warm days. Which graph should Ashley use to choose a month for her trip? If she wants to know when it will be 60 degrees or warmer, so is it something that's happening over time, or is it something where you're going to compare, on page 233, something where you're going to compare moderate or cold or warm days? Which is the appropriate type of graph? What would answer her question best? Melina? Why don't you open your book to page 233? Okay.
Line graph?
The line graph, yeah, because the amount of rainfall, or sorry, the amount of temperature, the temperature over time would be best graphed with a line graph. Yep. So that's the answer to number 1. You can write that down.
Is this an assignment?
I just gave you an assignment. Yes, write down the answer for number 1.
Done?
Page 233, number 1. Number 2, which graph would make it easier to decide if Chicago is a cold or warm city? Andrew?
Bar graph.
Why?
Because it shows the, oh gosh.
What are bar graphs used to do?
It's meant to compare.
Correct. Compare two different types of subjects, two different subjects. Yep. Cold days, warm days. You're comparing two things. So a bar graph. Number 3. How might the temperature data in the bar graph be used? Can you tell, or can you learn something about Chicago by looking at the bar graph? What type of decisions could you make? The bar graph about Chicago's temperatures. What could you learn about Chicago by looking at that bar graph? Hayden?
It's mostly cold.
Yeah, mostly moderate and cold. Yep. Why?
Because the bar graph, the bar that says cold and skies,
All right, yeah, it's mostly cold. The cold days outnumber the warm days, and then there's moderate days in between. It makes sense because of its location. It's in the northern hemisphere. Number 5, which graph better compares the time spent at the dinosaur exhibit to the total time at the museum? Aiden? No, are you on page 233? Have you been? Yeah, we're on number 5 already. Which one would best compare the amount of time spent somewhere compared to the total? Aiden. Which type of graph should you use to figure or to show something out of the total? A fraction out of the total? A circle graph, yes. A pie chart. All right? It shows the fraction out of the total.
Explain why it is?
No.
It just says okay. Never mind.
Which graph makes it easier to find the difference between the longest and shortest lengths of time between viewing visits? Michael. Which graph makes it easier to find the difference between the longest and shortest lengths of time spent? If it's comparing those two things, the longest and the shortest time spent, which of these graphs would you use? Longest time versus shortest time. Yeah, what's that called? No, what type of graph? It's a bar graph, right. Find the shortest one, find the longest one, and compare them. Subtract to find the difference. A bar graph is easiest to compare something like the shortest time versus the longest time. All right? Any questions on those, comparing those graphs? Any questions on those? 1 through 6 you should have done. Yep. Or go back and finish those. Then, go to lesson 4. Again, we're going to be working on choosing the appropriate type of graph. Look at number 1 under guided practice. Alonzo records the number of 6th graders who played on baseball teams in 2003, 2004, 2005, and 2006. Since the data changes over time, which type of graph would be best to use? Changes over time. What type of graph shows changes over time the best? Andrew?
Line graph.
A line graph. Yep. Number one. Number two. A research company counts the number of hot dogs sold by 3 different hot dog stands around the stadium. Since there's only 3 hot dog stands, which type of graph would show you a display of just a few different subjects? That's changes over time. That's compared to the total.
Bar graph.
A bar graph. Or a few subjects.
Pictograph.
A pictograph. A bar graph or pictograph. Yeah. Actually, depending on how you're analyzing the data, a circle graph might work well. Because you could show that this stand sells 40% or 50% of all the hot dogs. Why is that? So a circle graph does make sense as well. Okay? It depends on what it is that you want to use the graph for. Number 3. A school board determines how much the total school sports budget allows for baseball, basketball, soccer, and tennis. So out of the total, what would be the best graph to use?
Circle graph.
A circle graph, exactly. Yep. Since we're definitely want to compare those out of a total amount of money, circle graph is the best graph to use. And number 4, Jason groups the ages of 50 people whose favorite sport is baseball into intervals of 10. Which graph would be best for showing intervals graphing intervals of subjects? Maya? A histogram, that's right. Showing intervals of subjects. If it's ages of people, it says the groups of ages of 50 people. Any questions on those? Very good. All right. For your assignment, I want you to go to page 236. And I want you to practice reading this graph on bottles of water consumed and points scored. Yep. So do 12, 13, and 14. Using those tables, 12, 13, and 14, okay? Reading the table and analyzing the information in front of you.